Hey everybody, welcome into Next Round Preps. John Lunceford, Jerry Young here. And Jerry, this is the final week of region play for most teams. We like to call it Hoover Week, working for Thompson, because typically this is a week that, and a lot of the games we're going to talk about upcoming this week are, region title games. Not so much the case in 7A Region 3. Thompson locked it up last week. We'll get to that game here in a second, but this is when it really gets to the fun stuff. I already kind of have the brackets laid out. I'm just waiting for all the pieces to fall into place.
Yeah, I'm going to let you do most of the talking today because these brackets and, what you do, bracketology, is so much fun. I get compliments on it or comments on it all the time about why isn't so-and-so in here, why isn't this team over here. But the way it works out, and, talking about Hoover Week with Thompson this week, which is, I think, probably the biggest game in the state, ordinarily you would be saying this is for something that really means something. The game really means nothing other than bragging rights.
Yeah, that's why even though it's two name brand programs here, it's really, kind of fallen off from being the game. I mean, obviously in 7A we're going to pay attention to it. We're going to be there on the call, but there's a lot of other games we'll get to coming up that have kind of built themselves into being game of the week because of how Hoover has fallen off this season. But Hoover's still in the playoff. We'll get to that here in a second. All right, let's start down south with Jackson. Jackson has been on fire down in 4A. They beat St. Michael 42-21. They're looking really, really strong down there to make a good run in the playoffs. They locked up the region title with the win over St. Michael, and Phillip Rivers' squad. And St. Michael now has to do some work to get a better seed in the playoffs. Leeds and Moody, big matchup that last year was for the region title. This year, Southside Gadsden sitting there atop the region above these two. Leeds, they get a close win, 24-21. Scott Forrester, who handles all of our video stuff, his kids go to Moody, and he lives out in Moody. And he's like, what's the line? I said Leeds by a touchdown. It ended up being Leeds by a field goal. Leeds got up 14-0. Moody came back, and then Leeds ended up blocking a field goal at the end to win that one big over Moody. So Moody, they have Southside Gadsden this week, though, to potentially cause some chaos. I also can call this chaos week because most regions finish out easy enough. But there's always that one in every classification. I got to be like, okay, let's go back to the tiebreakers and see what happens. Demopolis, big win over Holtville to win that region title, 32-2. Winners there. Demopolis, both those teams unbeaten in their region. And then down in 5A in Region 1, UMS Wright, big winner over Citronelle, and they needed that one.
They did. They've lost to Gulf Shores this year. They lost to BC Rains, but they're still in it. Maybe not the UMS Wright that we're accustomed to over the last 2 or 3 years, but yeah, they're playing good ball and a big win, a much bigger win than I thought they'd have over Citronelle.
And look, UMS Wright actually only in this position. Don't forget they lost to Viger on the field. Viger had to forfeit when they announced that Pell City forfeit. Kind of lost in the shuffle was that Viger forfeit here in the Birmingham area because everybody was, Rush Probst had to forfeit a game. It's like, hey, Viger had to do that too. UMS Wright was one of those. If they didn't have that forfeit, they'd be out of the playoffs. They're still fighting for a position right now, but because of that win over Citronelle. But you mentioned the other games they lost. I mean, that's a tough region.
Yeah, when you said that, the HSAA announced that at the exact same time.
Yep.
And so you're right. In this part of the state in central Alabama, we were focused in on Pell City, but I saw the Viger. But at the time, you don't register. Well, how is that going to really affect anything? But here you go.
It does. There's the thing. It's kind of interesting, and not to get into the weeds of like some of the smaller classifications we don't really pay attention to, but there's actually 3 regions this year that are completely thrown on their head because teams forfeited games by choice. And when you forfeit a game by choice, you lose your right to be playoff eligible at that point, and it makes all of your games not count as region games. Now, one of those instances, I believe it was Anniston and Cleburne County. I can't remember who it was, but there was, it was White Plains. Anniston and White Plains. White Plains, there was a shooting incident, so they canceled the football game. Right. The HSA ended up overturning it, let them be playoff eligible, and I've had to completely change everything. It totally changes because sometimes you win those games, sometimes you lose those games, whether they count or not. But all that kind of gets lost in the shuffle of like, Pell City, Rush Probst had to forfeit a game, and then it's like, you forget about all this other stuff that's happening in the small classifications.
I never understood exactly what happened on that deal because Anniston actually forfeited, correct? Or was it White Plains?
I think it happened at Anniston. I don't remember really exactly either. And White Plains canceled the game because
They were afraid of safety.
Yeah, safety concerns is like, hey, let's just not play the game. And everybody's like, okay. But then the AHSA took it away, like, hey, okay, well, you're not eligible for the playoffs and your games don't count as region games anymore. And it's like, well, hold on. This was a safety thing. We weren't trying to, like, back out of a game, so then they reinstated it. But there's actually two. It's not for this specific reason, but there's two regions in 1A that same thing happened to. So it causes a mass headache when I'm trying to do my brackets.
Well, if you're looking at it, that's the only thing the HSAA can do, because otherwise there would be situations during the year whereas, okay, if we forfeit this game, we're going to make the playoffs no matter what.
Yeah.
So they automatically forfeit. Well, it's a good rule to have in place, but I'm glad they did the right thing. And
it's all based on situation, obviously. Right. There's a lot of situations out there, and of course, with the social media age, it gets even worse. Speculating around there. There's a whole scenario we can talk about right now when it comes to social media speculation that we won't really get into, because neither one of us really even know the whole scenario and situation with it all either. Right. But anyway, moving on. Let's go up to Class 6A down in Region 1. Theodore, big win over McGill-Tulane. Theodore still technically alive for the region title. They get Saraland this week. Congratulations. You get to play against arguably the best player in the state, and Ryan Williams there, Mr. Football from last year. But McGill-Tulane now, they still have an outside chance, but likely not going to make the playoffs down in Region 1. City Lanier and Carver Montgomery both playing for that first place spot. Carver, they beat Lanier 39-21, so now Lanier having to play for third place against Wetumpka. Carver, they'll play Pike Road down in 6A Region 2 for the region title. Bessemer City, how about this? Bessemer City, big win over Central Tuscaloosa 28-21. Central still alive. Bessemer City now has a win over Central and McAdory, but lost to Northridge, so that's the mass chaos kind of behind Hillcrest number 1, Hueytown's number 2. Kind of mass chaos right there, but that one's all over the place too. Homewood, they beat Pelham 31-21, knocked Pelham out of the playoffs. Homewood still alive for that second seed, and they will have to play Briarwood, who fell to Ben Russell last week, 25-21.
Ben Russell, the only region loss they have is to Homewood, your alma mater. And at the time, I remember back on that, I was leaning toward Ben Russell beating Homewood. Homewood, that's when they kind of woke up and went to work, so to speak. So, Ben Russell's a good football team, and they beat Briarwood, who is also another good football team. If you go back, Briarwood, lost to Helena by 3 or 4 points. I think it was 24-21, 3 points if I remember correctly. So, two good football teams squaring off. Congratulations to Ben Russell for winning it. And
Ben Russell, Briarwood, Homewood, Helena, those are your 4 playoff teams from that region. However, they all got to play each other this week to kind of help determine seeding. We'll get to that when we get up to week 9, which is the final week of region play for most regions. Mountain Brook and Mortimer Jordan. Mountain Brook, they fell to Parker, so they fell back to the second seed, but now they have the second seed with a win over Mortimer Jordan 54-14. They do play Gardendale this week. That could cause some chaos, but leading in a Mountain Brook win there, so they would get the second seed if they get that win. In 6A Region 6, Clay Chaltville, they are king of that region after beating Oxford 28-14. However, in that fourth place spot, Pinson and Shades Valley had a good game as well.
Well, they did. 28-25. I kind of picked Shades Valley to win that one for some reason because Pinson Valley, they started out a win, loss, and then win, and then loss, and then win. And I just kind of like, it's time for a loss right there. But Pinson Valley stood up when they needed to, and they beat Shades Valley.
Yeah, turning it around, 2-5 coming in, 1-3 in region play, end up getting a win. Even if they win out, they're still only going to be at 500 when they get to the playoffs because they will be the 4 seed there now in 6A Region 6 behind Clay. Oxford and Centerpoint play this week, and then Pinson Valley will get in there in that 4th spot. Moving up to Class 7A, Mary Montgomery, they lock up the region title over Daphne, 34-7 down in Region 1. They are unbeaten so far in the season, and I believe only Central Phoenix City and Mary Montgomery are unbeaten in 7A since Thompson. They're unbeaten in 7A play, but lost to Clay. And then James Clemens ended up getting beat by Austin a couple weeks ago. So big win there for Mary Montgomery over Daphne. Daphne's still alive for the 3rd seed right there. However, Foley, they lose 52-41 to Davidson. They still are technically alive, but they have to cause a 3-way tie, I believe, to get in right now because you have Mary Montgomery, Baker, Daphne, Davidson is your 4th team as of right now in my brackets, but still some games to go down there in Region 1. Up in Region 4, Bob Jones, they were looking good for that 2nd spot, but they fall to Austin this past week.
Yeah, Bob Jones, that's a massive loss in my book. I don't know how that's really going to affect how you're going to do your bracketology, but I really think that Austin is a team. I don't know if they're going to end up, or I think they're going to end up maybe the 4th seed in their region.
So Austin, as of right now, they're second in that region, only because they have some tiebreaker wins because they They beat James Clemens, who's going to probably end up being number one, barring a catastrophe this week because they have, I think, the bottom team in that region. So I have James Clemens 1. I have Austin 2 with that Bob Jones win. Bob Jones drops to 3rd. And now Florence is down at 4th. I believe Florence and Spartman still have to determine that spot to see who ends up playing Thompson. But, Austin, they worked their way all the way up to 2nd place right now.
Yeah, so, Austin can be a spoiler. That's the kind of team when I thought they were in 4 seed, but even in the 2 seed, 3 seed, that is a spoiler team. The Black Bears got a good football team.
It is. As of right now, they'll play Vestavia in the first round as things stand right now if it were to end today. And then the winner of that game would play Thompson. So they would have a chance to potentially knock off the top team there in Thompson, whoever wins that game. Moving down to Region 2, a couple of big matchups. Central Phoenix City, they lock up the region title in Region 2, 41-20 over Auburn. We've talked about Auburn's struggles this year. Still a good record overall, but with that loss now, that puts Auburn in a position where they could potentially tumble down depending on what happens this week. It's a 9-team region, so it'll actually go through next week as well. But with Dothan sitting there, with Enterprise sitting there, Auburn, and Opelika still an outside chance of working their way in behind Central. That's some chaos down in Region 2. Enterprise beat Opelika. That was a Thursday night game. They won 28-14 over the Bulldogs, so Enterprise looking good to make the playoffs as well. In Region 3, Vestavia, Oliver Oak Mountain, no shock there, 50-0. Hoover had to kind of struggle with Chelsea there early on, but it ended up pulling away big time in the second half, 41-7. The Bucks get the win there. Thompson, they beat Tuscaloosa County to lock up the region title 39-0. Once again, no real shock there. County had an 8-minute drive in the first quarter. They loved to hold on to that ball. We were there on the call for that one and didn't put any points on the board, but boy, they love to hold on that ball. They definitely want time of possession in that game. But the big game in 7A Region 3 that has now technically kept the team alive for the playoffs, that would be Spain Park upsetting Hewitt-Trussville.
So I wrote in my notes, wow. Okay. I mean, I don't even know how – we both seen those two teams play. Yeah. There is no way from what I saw that Spain Park had a chance to stay in the game with Hewitt-Trussville. But they did. And not only did they stay in the game, they beat them. So, I just, Spain Park coming alive. Of course, they did get some players back that were injured, and that had a lot to do with it. So it shows you that Spain Park could have been more of a factor in Region 3 had they have had, been at full strength. But congratulations to the Jaguars, and that's one of those chaotic wins right there.
Thompson beat them 55-14, and they beat Hewitt 40-14. Somewhat comparable scores there, but yeah, overall, I would have definitely thought Hewitt would have been able to get the win. I had Hewitt as a big favorite in my formula here, but hey, kudos to Tim Vakakis and the Spain Park Jags for getting that big win and technically alive. However, this week Hewitt has to lose to Chelsea. Thompson has to beat Hoover, which is expected, and then Spain Park has to win over Oak Mountain, which should happen. But the big one there, Hewitt and Chelsea, don't necessarily see that one happening. But then again, I didn't see Spain Park beating them either. So
last week, we were doing our pick'em on our pregame show, and I decided to take one game and step way out on just – well, believe it or not, it came down to 2 games. I was either going to pick Spain Park in an upset or was it Chelsea?
Chelsea over Hoover.
Chelsea over Hoover is an upset. I went with Chelsea over Hoover in the upset. If I'd have done the other, I'd have won hands down.
To be fair, for a little bit there in the first half, it's like, Jerry may be on to something here, and then they pulled away.
7-7, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was close in the first half, and then Hoover pulled away. But anyway, Spain Park getting the win there. So I said it was going to be a close game. I still thought Hewitt-Trussville was going to win instead of Spain Park winning by 21 points. But as we move on to Week 9, and we look ahead to this final week of region play for most teams, tell us about one of our great sponsors.
Yeah, Shepherd Equipment's been with us all season, shepherdequipment.com. Shepherd, by the way, is spelled Shephed, shepherdequipment.com. Their name of their company is Shepherd Equipment and Disposal. They do light demo, all outside work like tearing down a deck, getting rid of an old shed you need tore down, hauled off. They also do land clearing. They can even build you a road if you've got property and you need it cleared and you want a road built on it. They can do that as well. So a lot of things. They do bush hogging. They also have dumpsters. So if you need to rent a dumpster for your business, I can't tell you how good of people these are. You want to call them or go online and find out all the information. All their prices are listed right there. ShepherdEquipment.com. That's Shepherd Equipment and Disposal here in Central Alabama.
All right, when we get back, we'll look ahead to Week 9 of the high school football season. It's the 10th overall week. We'll take a look at some of the big matchups. Some big matchups for region titles coming up this week that we know will officially settle some regions, and a lot of playoff spots still up for grabs, plus our Milo's Player of the Week when we get back right here on Next Round Preps.
Have you or a loved one been diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, which is brain changes that are starting to interfere with your life? Did you know researchers have proven that these brain changes can be slowed down or reversed in many people that routinely exercise their brain? At the Care and Thrive Foundation, we specialize in helping you understand the specific areas of the brain that have changed and develop a brain health plan, including cognitive exercises, adaptive approaches, and helpful technology to proactively stay ahead of your brain wellness. Visit www.careandthrive.org for more information.
We've partnered with Who Is Coffee to create the Next Round Blend, available in light, medium, and dark roast. 100% Arabica beans. Specialty coffee roasted on demand, available in whole bean or ground for drip pods. Espresso and coarse ground for French press. Go to nextround.store to get a link to pre-order today. Everyone that pre-orders will be entered to win a prize pack with coffees, shirts, hats, and tumblers. Nextround.store for the Next Round Blend.
And welcome back in here to Next Round Preps. John Lunceford, Jerry Young here with you as we look ahead to week 9 of the football season. This is going to be the final week of region play for a lot of teams. Some playoff spots are already locked up. If you look at my bracketology, by the way, alpreps.com, you can go catch it all right there. Also on Twitter at alpreps, ALPREPS. You can find everything there. I finally got it out there. It was a little late this weekend and decided to go to the Alabama-Tennessee game, and then we had a event on Sunday that we were a part of, and so
John, I messed up this way. I've gotten more phone calls and texts from messing up. Every Saturday morning I post all the scores on my Facebook page, okay? I forgot it Saturday morning.
You're the voice of high school sports. You got to post them.
I know it, and so people have hounded me for the last few days, like, why in the world? So I promise I won't forget Saturday.
I got the same thing for bracketology. I usually come home Friday night and do it, but we actually hung out at Thompson for a little bit Friday night after the game, and it was like 11 o'clock by the time we left, so I was like, I'm too tired. I'll do it tomorrow. Well, then the next day I went to Tuscaloosa for the Alabama game. Then I was too tired, and it's like, where's the bracketology? I promise I'll get it done. I got it done finally Sunday night. But
hey, you liked the second half Alabama team a lot better than the first half, didn't you?
Yes, I wish the third quarter Alabama team especially. Third quarter is when they took the lead against Texas. Third quarter is when they took the lead against Tennessee. I'll take that any day of the week. Anyway, speaking of good performances like Alabama in the third quarter, let's get to our Milo's Player of the Week. And the player this week is Carson McFadden from John Carroll. How about this? 322 all-purpose yards in their win over Jasper. 5 touchdowns. He had 16 carries for 139 yards and 2 scores, plus 183 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. He was 12 of 15 passing. Also had 3 punts, including 2 down inside the 10-yard line. So just an outstanding job there from Carson McFadden. A big reason why John Carroll, I mean, we talked about at the beginning of the season. I was shocked that my Homewood Patriots lost to John Carroll that first week of the season, but they have proven themselves to be a playoff team there. Still got a little bit of work to do this week to make the playoffs, but they are the 3rd seed as of right now down there in that region behind Ramsey and Pleasant Grove, and have a chance to get a big win this week and lock up that 3rd seed. Maybe make a little bit of a playoff run, but congrats to Carson McFadden for being our Milo's Player of the Week this week for that win over Jasper. All right, let's get into Week 9 games. Let's move on. I just lost everything on my spreadsheet here, so I got to scroll down. All right, so there's some smaller games. We usually kind of start around 4A, like 3A, 4A, and some of the bigger teams. We follow a lot of happening down in Mobile, and of course all the stuff happening here in Central Alabama. But 3 big matchups down 4A, 3A, 2A that I want to talk about here. Number 1. Highland Home, the Flying Squadron. I think it's the best. I always do this every time I talk about them. The Flying Squadron down in Highland Home. I'm actually going to drive right by there, going down south this weekend. 9-0, 6-0 on the season. They are at Reeltown. 8-0, 6-0 on the season. This is for the 2A Region 3 title there. Highland Home going into Reeltown there to try to lock up that region. Up in 3A Region 1, Thomasville, unbeaten, heading to Mobile Christian, who's sitting at 9-0, 6-0 in region play. Mobile Christian always year in, year out, one of the best teams in the state, regardless of classification. That's for the 3A Region 1 title. Should be a good one down in Mobile. And then in Montgomery, Andalusia, 9-0, 6-0 on the season at Montgomery Catholic, 9-0, 6-0 on the season for the 4A Region 2 title. These 2 teams have been absolutely phenomenal this season. I talked about both of them being pound for pound, maybe one of the best teams in the state. I know you don't typically look beyond 7 or 6A to give one of the best teams in the state, you go with Thompson, Central Phoenix City, Clay Chalkville, Saraland, those teams. But both these teams, Andalusia, Montgomery Catholic, really all 6 of the teams I just said, all really, really solid teams. That's for the 4A Region 2 title. So congrats to all those teams for an unbeaten season so far, and good luck this weekend in those games as well. All right, moving up to Class 4A for Region 4. This one matchup is for second in Region 4. American Christian, always really good. They have to travel to Montevallo.
Yeah, and I noticed you made a note on here that Montevallo can tumble out with a loss. I did not realize that, but Montevallo's only lost to Bibb County and West Blockton. So the two Bibb County teams have given Montevallo a fit, but they need a win. Montevallo can erase all that doubt, do everything with a win over American Christian, which is going to be a tall order. However, American Christian is 7-2, so they've dropped a couple of games this year as well.
Yeah, that the reason they can tumble out non-region games, it could be, for anybody that goes to L Preps and checks out the bracketology and wonders, well, hey, the team I like has won 3 games, and the team they're competing against has only won 1 game out of region. The way it works is not winning percentage. Like in the NFL, it's just whoever has the most wins. That's how you make it. It's all based on win percentage. But that's not the way it works in the AHSAA. The way it works is it's the quality of the teams that you've beaten. So what they do is they measure, so let's say Thompson this year. Okay, so Thompson will only have played 2 non-region games. Now, they lost to Clay Chalkville. They beat Opelika. So Opelika right now is sitting at 4 wins. If Thompson were in a 3-way tiebreaker, they would only have 4 wins to their name. Now, you look at a team like Hewitt-Trussville. So, there's a chance of a Hewitt-Trussville-Hoover-Spain Park 3-way tie. That Hewitt-Trussville beat a team like Huffman. Huffman has not scored a point all season, so there's no wins right there. But a team like Spain Park beat Briarwood. Well, Briarwood's sitting there with 4 wins on the season. So beating Briarwood counts more than beating Huffman because it's 4-0 based on wins that your defeated opponents have. So it's really complicated, and there's a lot of tiebreakers that I've sat there and had to study forever to kind of understand how all this ultimately fits. But that's why a team like Montevallo, based on it's the quality of the wins. It's not just the fact that you have the wins and losses. So that's kind of what you have to keep in mind when it comes to thinking about where teams will ultimately fit within the bracket. Moving up into 5A, Region 1, Viger, this is 5A. Viger at Gulf Shores. Gulf Shores will win the region with a win. Viger could potentially drop out with a loss, and that's because of that UMS Wright forfeit, that they won the game on the field. UMS Wright ended up getting the forfeit win. They also lost to Faith Academy on the field, but UMS Wright is at Faith Academy to help kind of determine who could potentially be that 4th team in.
Yeah, and these two teams, we talked about UMS Wright in the first part of the show. They're 5-3, 4-2 on the year, 5-3, 4-2 for Faith Academy, which we don't say very often either.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be a close matchup, but once again, to go back one, Viger with a chance, and you said that with that loss, but that forfeit earlier, but that Gulf Shores team is good. Viger could upset Gulf Shores. That's not a gimme in my book by any means.
Oh, yeah.
But UMS Wright, Faith Academy, I think 2 squared off teams, it's a flip a coin.
And the loser is likely out between these two. This is a 9-team region, so it'll travel to next week to see what happens. But what they're going to need, the loser's going to need BC Rain to lose to Alberta. And a lot about Alberta. Probably not going to happen because BC Rain's been pretty good this year. BC Rain already beat UMS Wright, but the loser needs to hope for chaos if they still want to try to make it into the playoffs.
They can hope all they want to. Alberta's not a very good football team. Just that simple.
Moving up to John Carroll, the team we just talked about. They take on Winona this week. John Carroll locks up 3rd with a win. If Winona wins and Fairfield beats Hayden, it'll cause a 3-way tie that still likely John Carroll will win. So John Carroll looking good regardless to make it into the playoffs there. We mentioned Moody and Leeds last week. Good close game there that the Green Wave ended up winning. Southside Gadsden, they travel to Moody this week. Southside wins. They win 5A Region 6 and finish 1st, and Moody will be 3rd. If Moody wins, it'll cause a 3-way tie with both Leeds and Southside Gadsden, where it'll go to non-region games there. So the Blue Devils still trying to stay alive for that region title. Fairview at Russellville, big matchup up north.
Well, you're not kidding. Fairview 8-0, Russellville 7-1. These two teams, when I've highlighted this game to talk about a little bit, I know it's for the region title, but Fairview outplaying Russellville right now on paper, but I still like Russellville to come in and win the game. It's kind of not a catch-22, but it's just interesting to me. I think that's going to be one of the closest, best matchups in the state.
Yeah, Russellville's a team I always keep an eye on. When I was at Homewood, that was the team we always had to get through. That's who I played in both my state championship games was Russellville. Even before Homewood moved to the South, they had to play them in the semifinals in the North in 2000 and 2001. So I remember going up there to watch those games and going up to Russellville and seeing the atmosphere up there. Russellville's always a team I keep my eye on when it gets to this point of the season, who can make a little bit of a run, not only to potentially win the region title, to potentially make a run towards a state title. Up in Class 6A, in Region 1, I mentioned Saraland and Theodore. They are playing for basically first place. Saraland locks up the region title with a win. Theodore beat them last year. It was Saraland's only loss of the season last year, 27-26. Saraland got revenge and ended up winning the state title last year over Mountain Brook. But Theodore did get the win in this game last year. However, they have to go to Saraland and have not been quite as strong this season. In Region 2, Carver, Montgomery, and Pike Road playing for the 6A Region 2 title, with Wetumpka and Sidney Lanier playing for 3rd and 4th. All 4 teams are locked into the playoffs. But Pike Road and Carver, Montgomery both unbeaten at 5-0 in region play. And the winner there will be the 1 seed coming out of Region 2. In Region 3, we mentioned it, Homewood, Briarwood, Helena, Ben Russell. These are all teams to keep an eye on. But, of course, we both have our eye on that Homewood-Briarwood game.
Absolutely. You know, Homewood started out 3 losses. It's like, wow, what's happened to the Patriots? And then how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a row.
Yep.
And they've been convincing wins. And you go back and look at Benjamin Russell. They beat them 41-21. They beat Chilton County 34-13. They beat Pelham 31-21. These are quality wins for Homewood. You know, it's a rivalry game. You got to say Briarwood and Homewood, not just because their last part of their names are wood, but Home and Briar.
Well, it kind of became that way in the early 2000s when I was there. You had the Castiles at Briarwood. You had me at Homewood, obviously. But, you know, because that was right around the time when they started doing the 1.5, you know, person or whatever it is for private schools. And they jumped up from 3A, where they had been winning the state championships, up to 5A. Won a state championship in, what was that, 2003. It was Simeon Castile's senior year. They beat us in the semifinals to end up going on to that state championship game. And it was back and forth. It's kind of how Thompson Hoover has been the last few years. It was kind of Homewood Briarwood there in 5A, and it's continuing now in 6A in that region.
Yeah, you're right. Briarwood won it in 99 and 2000 because my son played on that team. But, yeah, I think you were at Homewood right after he graduated.
Yeah.
So, but the Castiles at that time, you know, my gosh, he was like an 8th grader, 9th grader. He was like Trent Seaborn at Thompson. So he moved on. I remember a coach saying, I was running the down marker one time, and they were up by a couple of touchdowns, and somebody said, "Hey, Coach, we got this one." He said, No. There's a Castile on the field for Briarwood. They're not out of it. Sure enough, Briarwood came back and won that game. So I'll never forget that coach who was at Chelsea at the time is who Briarwood was playing. So, yeah, this is going to be a great ball game.
Look, the first time I ever played Briarwood my sophomore year, it was 18-13 at Briarwood. I mean, it was the definition of a slobber knocker. I mean, I could see the exact same thing happening in this game between Homewood and Briarwood. Put it in the formula. Homewood came out as a 1.5-point favorite. That's about as close as it can get. So should be going there between Homewood and Briarwood. But Helena's at Ben Russell. They got to go down to Alexander City. So, you know, Ben Russell, if they could pull an upset right there, then all of a sudden you got Homewood. The winner, if Homewood wins, Homewood, Ben Russell, and Helena, a 3-way tie there. Now, Helena has had some big wins in non-region play, and you mentioned Homewood's struggled to start off. Ben Russell has lost to Central Clay County, so Helena still might win that one. I really hadn't done it because I don't expect that to happen, but there's a chance there. Helena only about a touchdown favorite as they go down to Ben Russell. In Region 4, McAdory at Hillcrest, Tuscaloosa. Hillcrest, they've already locked up the region, but McAdory actually needs to win this game to guarantee that they make the playoff. If they lose this, there's a chance they can miss it. Other games going on in that region. Hueytown at Central Tuscaloosa. Central needs to win, but still may miss because that Bessemer City lost last week. And the Bessemer City at Paul Bryant. Bryant's still technically alive at 2-4 in region play, 3-5 overall. But Bessemer City has actually beaten both Central and McAdory, so if they beat Bryant, they'll be in. There's just some absolute chaos behind Hillcrest and Hueytown in that region. But McAdory, Central, Bessemer City, Bryant, all must-win scenarios there in that region. So we'll see what happens there. Mountain Brook in Region 5 at Gardendale. Mountain Brook 4-1 of the season. They beat Mortimer Jordan last week, so they got the tiebreaker on them. Gardendale, they're at 3-2. They've already lost to Mortimer Jordan and Parker in that region, but they're on a 3-game win streak. Kind of the same thing. Talk about Homewood starting out 0-3. Gardendale started out 0-5, and they've rattled off 3 straight there. So they are in the playoffs. Mountain Brook could lock up second with a win. Gardendale can cause a 3-way tie that could potentially send Mountain Brook to 4th because they lost to Vestavia, and they beat Hoover, which doesn't really count for much like it used to. They're in non-region play, so they would not have a very good non-region record when it comes to tiebreakers. Up in region, or this is actually a non-region game between Region 5 and Region 6, and I only put it on here because we could potentially see history happen. Huffman, 0-9, 0-6 in region play. They are at Parker, who's 8-1, 6-0 in region play. They've already locked up the region title there over Mountain Brook Jordan and Gardendale, but we have never in the history of the AHSA had a team go 0-10 without scoring a single point. There have been a few 6-point teams, and there have been a few 7-point teams. Most of those even come before the playoff era back in the 70s. So this has never happened before. And Parker, they got a good team. Parker's got a chance to make a run in the playoffs, potentially to a state title. Parker upset Clay Chaltville last year. I can't wait for a potential Parker-Clay Chaltville matchup. I haven't even looked to see if they could potentially meet up before the semis, but Huffman has not scored a single point all season. They are at Parker in a non-region game. Let's see if Parker can do it. They can get the final shutout. I thought maybe last week against Pell City they could have scored a point. Didn't do it. Parker trying to make the impossible happen. In Region 6, where Huffman comes from, Centerpoint, they are at Oxford. Big matchup there for second in the region.
Yeah, we were talking about Pell City having to forfeit that game with Viger at the same time. This has something to play into that as well. But George Bates, Sam Adams at Oxford, George Bates at Centerpoint. George Bates has only lost one game. You want to guess who it's to? Clay Chaltville.
Yep.
All right, so, they got a good football team, and so does Oxford. We know that. So, I know that Oxford's riding high right now, but for some reason George Bates seems to always – come up with that big win when he needs it. The only difference is that Centerpoint's got to travel to Oxford. All that new facility, all those new upgrades might have Centerpoint a little wide-eyed when they hit the field. So I think it's going to be a toss-up game. Oxford should be favored heavy to win. I just like the Centerpoint's chance.
Yeah, I got Oxford by about 21 in this game, strictly based on the numbers. You think they'll bring Centerpoint in and say, hey, here's our cool new facilities y'all can check out?
I would. I'd give them a tour.
You're right. It could be a little intimidating because we were there with Thompson a couple years ago when they were starting to build all of that stuff, and it was intimidating just seeing it. I mean, look, Thompson has facilities like that too, but going in and seeing those pictures, it's an incredible facility over there at Oxford. But Centerpoint only in this position. They're guaranteed at least third, even if they lose this game, because of that forfeit. They lost to Pell City on the field, ended up getting that forfeit win. If not, they would have had a chance to finish fourth or tumble out, depending on what happened, because that could put them at 3 losses had they lost to Pinson or Shades Valley. I mean, they kind of lucked out with that Pell City forfeit win coming back their way, where they could potentially get home field if they win this game. Up in Class 7A, Foley at Daphne, and boy, it's always weird when you say, kind of the same with Prattville. Prattville's out of it already, but Foley, they must win to try to make it in. Daphne, they'll lock up third if they get the win here. It's just weird to say, Foley potentially miss, Prattville potentially miss. I know we talk about it every year, but both of them trying to get back to their old ways there.
Well, some of the Foley kids, I understand, have moved over to Gus Shores, and Gus Shores, speaking of facilities, you see that.
Oh, yeah.
Gus Shores just announced they're about to drop multi-millions of dollars in a new facility. So, yeah, that's interesting that Foley, I don't know if they're down a little bit the last year or two because of that. I don't know. But I do know that there are some kids that were living in Foley that now live in Gulf Shores.
Yeah, Gulf Shores obviously doing really good, unbeaten on the season. We talked about them earlier playing Viger. Up in Region 2, Dothan at Opelika. Opelika, if they lose, they're out. This is their last region game. They will not go on to next week like most teams in this region will. Dothan, meanwhile, can lock things up, getting to 5-2 on the season if they get the win over Opelika. We saw Opelika early in the season against Thompson. They had their moments, but in a region with Central, in a region with Auburn, Enterprise, Dothan, it's going to be tough for Opelika in that one. I do like Dothan to get the win over Opelika in this one. Moving up to Region 4 before we jump into Region 3 and a couple of big games there. Spartman at Florence. Basically a battle to get in right now. Spartman gets the win, they'll jump into that 4 seed. If Florence gets a win, they'll likely be that 4 seed. This is almost a battle to see who gets to play Thompson in a couple of weeks, since Thompson's already locked up that 1st seed. And then Austin, they're at Huntsville. Austin, if they win, they'll lock up 2nd, and they'll get a 1st if James Clemens loses. James Clemens should not lose. They're playing one of the bottom teams there. Can't remember if it's Albertville or Grissom. They're playing one of the bottom teams there in Region 4. Huntsville, they need to win to try to make the playoffs. If they lose, they are officially out. Moving into Region 3, we talked about Spain Park, the big win they had over Hewitt-Trussville last week. They get Oak Mountain this week. Technically alive. They obviously got to get a win over Oak Mountain. We expect that to happen. Vestavia, they're at County. This is basically a battle for pride for Tuscaloosa County because they cannot make it even though they're sitting at 2-4 on the season. Vestavia, they need to win to guarantee a top 3 seed. Technically, if they lost to County and Hoover beat Thompson, they would jump them. Also, Hewitt-Trussville sitting at 4-2. Hoover, Vestavia, Hewitt are all technically tied right now at 4-2. Thompson's already won at 6-0. Hewitt-Trussville, they are at Chelsea. They're 6-3. 4-2. Chelsea 2-7. 1-5. If Chelsea wins, it could cause chaos. That's a big if. But then again, we said it was a big if with Spain Park, and it happened.
That's right. That's a big.
So
big
you never know. Just throwing that out there. If Chelsea wins and Thompson wins and Spain Park wins, it will cause a 3-way tie between Hewitt, Spain Park, and Hoover, where it will go to non-region games, which Hoover has not won a single game. Therefore, they cannot win that. Hewitt-Trussville lost to Central and beat Huffman. That's 0. They would have to take all their wins from Gadsden City. Spain Park beat Calera, who either has 1 or no wins, but they beat Briarwood, who could potentially get their 5th win this weekend and potentially end up with 6. And then I don't remember who they have next week. They do have somebody next week, or they have another game. Anyway, there's a chance that Spain Park could work their way in with this. So Spain Park's got to win. Hewitt-Trussville has got to win to lock up second and to move on to the playoffs and get that home field. Meanwhile, we'll be at the Hoover Met in a game that has lost a lot of its luster. Hoover sitting at 4-5 on the season. Thompson at 7-1. Nothing is at stake because we expect Hoover to lose this game. They still will be 4th. Thompson, if they win or lose, will still be 1st. Nothing really is at stake unless Hoover can win and another upset happens to maybe move up to 3rd. But a little shocking that we're at this point.
So, John, we go back 10 weeks ago. I'm sitting here saying, hey, Hoover's going to have a losing record when they get to Thompson. You'd have kicked me off the show.
Yeah.
No way. I mean, it'd have been, and this guy's gone crazy.
That's worse than your Chelsea over Hoover last week.
That's right.
prediction.
That's right. So, a losing record. Here's what's on the line for Hoover. A 500 season and a guaranteed spot in the playoffs, even though it's a 4th seed. They lose this game. Like those scenarios you just said happens, then Hoover's out of the playoffs if one of those scenarios happen. But also they end up with a losing season. When's the last time that ever happened? I don't even know. I got to go back and research it. But I'm going to tell you, there's a lot on the line and there's nothing on the line. Everything's on the line for Hoover. Thompson doesn't matter to them other than bragging rights. That's the only importance of this game. But it's going to be a good game. It's going to be played at the Hoover Met. We'll have it for you. John and I will be there on the call. You can find it at the warriornationnetwork.org. You can watch it if you're a subscriber to the NFHS network, or you can listen to it for free right there. Just click the radio broadcast there under Listen Now. So warriornationnetwork.org.
You have to go back to, I decided to look it up while you're doing that, 1998. They went 4-6. Gerald Gann's last year there. Coach Gann, actually volunteer coach at Birmingham Southern when I was there. His son, the athletic director now at Homewood. But did a lot of good at John Carroll other schools. But yeah, he went 4-6 in his last year there. The year right before, a man named Rush Probst came in, went 7-3, and then obviously the rest is history after that. So it's been a while since that's happened. It's been a while. 25 years since they've had a losing record there overall on the season. So we'll see what happens. Thompson at Hoover will be at the Hoover Met, like Jerry just mentioned, on the call there on the Warrior Nation Network. And after Friday night, I will try to go in and update everything I can. I'm going out of town this weekend, but before I leave, I'm going to knock everything out. And it will all be up at alpreps.com. That's where all the bracketology is now. If I didn't name a game and you're kind of wondering, hey, is this team in the bracket or are they not? Go to alpreps.com. Every classification's there. Click it. It's all done by region, so you can go and look and see who's in and who's out and kind of get a look at the bracket right now. Still plenty to be decided, but get a look at the bracket right now and see what could potentially happen for your team. All right. Week 10, next week, final week of the regular season, and then the fun begins with the playoffs. We'll break down all the Week 9 action and look ahead to the final week of the regular season and non-region play for most teams next week right here on Next Round Preps.